Weird matchmaking. Coming up this weekend at featherweight, we have The Truth. He was formerly known as that. It's now no nickname for TJ Laramie, coming in here at 24 years old, making a second time out with the UFC. He's taking on Renzo Gracie Philly's own Pat Sabatini, the former CFFC standout. You know Paul Felder's excited for this fight. Sean Brady and the crew over there that represent that gym. But for Sabatini, undefeated in the UFC. Has he withstood adversity? I don't know. Did Jamal Emmers crack him, rock him, pretty well finish him, and then decide, hey, I'm going to go for a finish on the ground? That's Sabatini's world. He went in there and got a wicked submission. Haven't seen Jamal Emmers back in the UFC since then. That was about 6 months ago when he got that heel hook. He also got a big time win over Tucker Lutz's last time out. And before that, a close enough fight, but a good win nonetheless over Tristan Connolly in his UFC debut about 10 months ago. So for Sabatini, not this weekend, but last weekend at UFC 273, he was due to take on Gavin Tucker, Atlanta Canadian. And we don't get that fight. Tucker's out. And for TJ Laramie, he was supposed to take on Melzik Bogdasarian. Bogdasarian out, so they went, you know what, Canadian-American, let's boogie. And they give us TJ Laramie and Pat Sabatini. And the weirdest part about this is, TJ Laramie is one of those guys, bricks in his hands, and he really does throw them out there when he goes to close distance. And that's the best part about his game. If you look at his overall run, over with TKO in 2017, he beat Charles Jourdain. Yes, that's Charles Jourdain. Laramie was 20, Jourdain was 22, and Laramie's able to go out there and capture the featherweight belt. Laramie also the former PFC, not KFC, champ at 145 pounds, beats Daniel Swain on Contender Series, and then he goes out there against Derek Minner, and I know we're going to talk a lot about that Derek Minner fight. Craziest part about TJ Laramie, he fought Charles Jourdain, his brother Tony fought Louis Jourdain, who's the brother of Charles Jourdain. So the pride of Beloit, Quebec, Canada, taking on the pride of Windsor, Ontario. And for Ontario's own Laramie, comes in against Derek Minner. He is a big favorite for that fight. He's a minus 315. And when he went out there, not the most advantageous of position for TJ Laramie. He loses that fight in the first minute. Minner gets the win. And then he's booked with Damon Jackson, but he has to back out of that fight. He's supposed to take on Melzik Bogdasarian back in November. He gets a bad case of MRSA, so you hate to see that. It was in the inside of his thigh. I kind of saw that in an interview, and then there were some spots on his face. Gets that cleared up, and then he's rematched with Bogdasarian for this weekend. Melzik out of the fight. In steps Pat Sabatini. But Matt, I set it up this way. You've got a guy who's young at 24, TJ Laramie, minus 315 against Derek Minner, loses that fight, and now we don't normally bring the odds up this early, but he's a plus 270 right now as an underdog against Pat Sabatini. It's just crazy to see that big of a sway from one fight to the next.
It definitely is, but I will say this, because you had brought up both guys' original matchups and then them being put together. This is one of those weird situations where Bogdasarian versus TJ Laramie, sign me up. I think that's a great fight. Gavin Tucker versus Pat Sabatini, another great fight. Oh my goodness, some opponents fall out. I still think Laramie Sabatini is going to be a really fun fight because, like, all four of these guys, no matter who you match them up with, I think it would result in fireworks no matter what. You're right, though, for Laramie, was a big favorite coming into the UFC, didn't look good whatsoever. You know who his debut reminded me of? And I think you'll agree, Hakeem Dawodu. Couldn't have gone any worse.
Danny Henry fight.
And, like, you come in, there's some hype behind you, and you're a great striker, we're all excited, what happens? You get finished by a guillotine 30 seconds into the fight, and we just never really see you settle into the actual matchup.
And that fight was just over a month removed from his win on Dana White's Contender Series against Daniel Swain. And Swain went for some really good submission attempts early, he went for a couple. And then TJ Laramie just kind of sat in guard, and they likened it to Mark Coleman way back in the day. He's just pounding away, and at the end of the round, and listen, Camwella Kirk learned a lot from TJ Laramie in that fight, because at the end of the round, Daniel Swain's standing in his corner. He's like, man, I can't do it. I can't get any power. And his corner's like, well, then we're going to call the fight. No, let's bring in the doctor. And the doctor presses, and he's like, yeah, but my rib's going in. So the doctor's like, no. Can't fight anymore. Jason Herzog waves it off. Camwella Kirk going into his fight against Daniel Swain was like, I know he's going to quit. And what happened? He made Daniel Swain quit on the stool.
I don't think you quit if your rib's moving when the doctor's pressing it. That's not you quitting. That's the doctor stopping
Quit in the corner. Camwella Kirk took from that to try and make him quit. But for TJ Laramie, it is power shots when he's on the feet, to close the distance, to get into the clinch, to work the takedown, to work his ground and pound. And throughout his career, we've seen these big time wins by finish. And you look at it very, very early on. Even his first fight with Pancrase, when he was very young, at 17, he was traveling over to Japan. And it doesn't matter the fact that he was taking on a guy who had a salty record. It was what? 4-8-4 over with Pancrase, but good experience for him nonetheless to get that in his back pocket. But I just wonder kind of where the development has been over this year and a half that we've seen him away from the octagon, because we know what we're going to get out of Pat Sabatini. Is your striking the best? Not so much, but his grappling is whoop. We're turning that power bar all the way up and trying to crank it off. So it's going to be a very, very interesting stylistic matchup here.
We're just trying to figure out at what stage of the Grant Dawson, Gregor Gillespie skill tree is Pat Sabatini right now, because I do feel like all three of those fighters kind of fall under the same overall archetype right now, but Sabatini is the most unproven out of all those three. Now, I think he has a very high ceiling, and I do want to say that. But Sabatini, to me, is just shy of one of those prospects that you're ready to anoint as a future contender already. I really like some of the skills that I've seen in his fights, but he has left some reasons to think, okay, when he does start to fight guys who are a little bit more well-rounded, who have slightly better takedown defense and can expose him as not a poor striker, really just a basic striker at the end of the day, I think Laramie can have a lot of success early on. We know how fast of a striker is. Like, hand speed in this matchup is not even close between Laramie and Sabatini. Laramie's hands are lightning quick, whereas Sabatini, there's a little bit of push and recoil, is a little bit more methodical on the feet. But I do think that if Sabatini gets this to the mat, which I do expect him to, it's going to be one of those cases where he's damaging it with his ground and pound. He's getting past your guard. He's really making you pay for every minute you're spent on the bottom. And I think Laramie, not that he's a poor grappler by any means, but when you've been submitted in the past and now you're going against a guy who I really do believe is of that degree of grappler in Sabatini, I do think you're going to struggle, especially with the defensive wrestling.
It really is a tough one, and I do expect Laramie to actually go out there, go for his own offensive takedowns, because that's what's worked for him in the past, and I just can't see a ton of success. Even Sabatini off his back is one of those tricky fighters, and Daniel Swain even offered up quite a bit when it came to that in that fight that they had on Contender Series. So the odds for this one, Sabatini open to minus 240, he's minus 365 favorite right now. Laramie open plus 205, as I mentioned earlier, plus it's 270 or thereabouts. We have a look at the Tapology votes. To us, they are a surprise. To you, they are a surprise. I say the over-under, 75% Pat Sabatini.
They should be over, I would think.
They are way over. 500 total votes, 94% Sabatini, 64% by submission for the 6% that have Laramie, 54% by decision, 25% by knockout. I could see a world where TJ Laramie goes out there, throws hammers, knocks Pat Sabatini down to the ground, finishes it up by TKO. I don't think that's a wild assessment. If that fight against Derek Minner didn't happen, because now it clouds my judgment. So recency bias for sure. I do have Pat Sabatini in this fight. But this is an interesting matchup because Laramie is really getting thrown to the wolves in this fight. And this is against an unranked guy in a pretty darn deep division at featherweight. So it should be a good one.
Yeah, and I think Sabatini, maybe not destined for top 15, but I think he offers anybody on the borderline of the rankings at least a tough fight right now, because he does have one of those X factors outside of the rankings. Because how many fighters, they're just kind of well-rounded, and we wait for them to win a few fights in a row, and then they're in the rankings. Pat Sabatini has an extremely dominant top position in his game, which is enough to go out there and really not only win rounds, but get genuine finishes at any point throughout the fight. So that's why I like Sabatini. But I think Laramie, he's going to go in there with the game plan of, hey, I'm probably going to get taken down no matter what, so might as well just go for broke, and that's going to make him pretty dangerous against Sabatini.
Like that takedown offense out of TJ Laramie. We'll see how he makes out in this fight. Winner gets Jonathan Martinez, a big-time fight coming up this weekend, and some more big-time fights on this main card, including a rematch in the main event between Vicente Luque and Bilal Muhammad that you're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.